Go and get it.
Yeah, I'm going even to lecture in a school in Jaffa.
Right. Oh, good. Like in a mixed school or in a
In a school that has Arab and Israeli
Hebrew.
children together. Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's a school where Shuki's granddaughter is going to.
Yeah, he initiated it.
Right. Oh, okay. Great.
Yeah.
Wonderful.
Very happy.
Salut, Raffaella. You know, Raphael and me, we're only about 10 minutes apart.
Hi, Eduard. I haven't seen you a long time.
Yes. How are you? How are you,
Fine.
Pamela?
Fine, fine.
Edouard, je vais assez bien, merci.
Eduard.
Today was really good.
Today is the New Year?
Which New Year? The Tibetan New Year?
Tibetan?
No, 21st of February.
21st.
February.
In a month.
Yeah.
Okay.
But there was one New Year in Nepal already.
Chinese and Nepal and Chinese.
Okay, Geshe is here.
Hi, Gishima.
Hi, hello.
I just want to announce everyone that I'm going to put on the chat the link to the driver where all the files are. So you can take them from there if you don't have it or you don't see the WhatsApp. So that's all. Just will make you co-host, Gishima.
Sure, there's no rush because we're still, well, for the prayers, I don't need to be our co-host. Okay. Great. Okay.
iPad 6.
So let's start with some breathing meditation, mindfulness of the breath. And then visualize in the space in front of you your own Lama in the aspect of Buddha Shakyamuni, who's the embodiment of all enlightened beings. He wears the saffron robes of a monk. And he's seated in the full lotus posture. I think that his face is very beautiful, radiant, and inspiring. And his smiling, compassionate gaze is directed at you and simultaneously at all other sentient beings who are surrounding you. Think that all sentient beings are seated wherever there's some space. All of them appearing in the form of human beings. And remember that the nature of their mind and the nature of the Buddha's mind is not different in that. The nature of the mind of all sentient beings is completely pure. With their afflictions merely adventitious and temporary. But still, every sentient being, especially those not liberated yet, experiences endless sufferings. And no matter how happy someone may seem, everyone's got problems. Or at least experiencing the suffering of birth, aging, sickness, and eventually death. And since we don't really differ from sentient beings, we're not that different. Let's generate the same sense of care that we have towards ourselves. Let's generate that towards all sentient beings. A deep sense of care for their well-being. This affectionate love. Getting close towards them and accepting them with all their shortcomings. Which then gives way to great compassion. Which not only wishes for all sentient beings to be free from any unwanted experiences, but also wishes and aspires towards leading sentient beings towards a state free from suffering. It's the thought, may I be able to help sentient beings to overcome all their suffering and its causes. And then allow for that aspiration to grow stronger. To transform into determination. That is the altruistic attitude. Thinking I will do whatever is necessary to help sentient beings overcome suffering, overcome all their suffering by helping them to overcome its causes. And then think that since that is only realistically only possible once become enlightened ourselves, let's therefore then, for the sake of all sentient beings, generate the aspiration to become completely enlightened. Wish to become a fully enlightened Buddha. For the sake of each and every sentient being. And I think that it's also with that motivation that we continue to study Nagarjuna's fundamental wisdom. And then, without letting go of the visualization and our motivation, let's recite the prayer. Okay, I'll just read it. Oh, there it is. I go for refuge until I'm enlightened to the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Supreme Assembly. By the accumulation of merits of practicing generosity and so forth, may I become a Buddha to benefit all sentient beings. I go for refuge until I'm enlightened to the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Supreme Assembly. By the accumulation of merits of practicing generosity and so forth, may I become a Buddha to benefit all sentient beings. I go for refuge until I'm enlightened to the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Supreme Assembly. By the accumulation of merits of practicing generosity and so forth, may I become a Buddha to benefit all sentient beings. I just realized I completely forgot to look at the Word file that I received from Jimmy. So Jimmy, next time, I'll do it next time. I forgot the words that he sent. Yeah, next time I'll make them available. Okay, so then what's next? All right, let's start with a Lamrim, as we usually do. Can you see the Lamrim outlines? Okay, all right, great. Okay, Now, thinking of the suffering, well, considering the quality of life in the two possible kinds of future rebirth. So mainly this refers to considering the possibility of being reborn in one of the lower realms. Well, and as I said last time, the difficulty of this particular subject or the particular topic of the Lamrim is that it takes as a given that the students of the Lamrim, the ones or the practitioners of the Lamrim, believe in past and future lives. In fact, there's no separate topic in the Lamrim that explains rebirth. You have, of course, explanations, for instance, in the second chapter of the Pramanavartika, or the commentary on valid cognition by Dharmakirti, but you don't have any other text that really explains it more extensively than that second chapter. So the Lamrim just takes it as a given. But I think it's a good opportunity, or it gives us the opportunity to reflect on past and future lives as one aspect, just the continuity of consciousness, which we naturally assume while we're alive. While we're alive, we have a sense our mind continues. We don't have a sense that our mind comes purely from the brain or comes purely from the body, because we use our mind, for instance, to study for exams. We use the mind to, I don't know, memorize something or try to understand a certain topic in order then to be able to take exams on it. So it's not like we expect our brain to now, of course, we also want our brain to function and to be well rested and so forth, because there's a close relationship between mind and body. But we have a sense that whatever input, whatever I put into my mind helps me then the next day to be able to take the exam. So there's definitely a sense that there's a continuation of mind. But somehow we have a sense, well, when we die, that's all over. Especially because we feel that, well, the body, or not just we feel, it's of course the case that our body doesn't continue, therefore our mind doesn't continue as well. That's this, that the body doesn't continue. Of course, that's true, but with regard to the mind, that's just a wrong assumption in that case. And there are a lot of reasons, for instance, the tendencies we're born with, that well, despite our upbringing and despite our siblings who don't have certain tendencies, well, that manifest in our continuum, but not on the continuum of our siblings, or not even our parents. So there are a lot of reasons that support the idea that, well, we've existed before, we had likes and dislikes, we had tendencies, and we were born with them. Of course, there are a lot of cases of people remembering past lives, there are a lot of documentaries on them you easily find on these children who remember having lived before. So it's interesting to maybe watch those. And basically, well, yeah, the idea, of course, of mind continue on. Anyway, having done that, having dealt with that, and I'm sure you know a lot of the reasons, and if you don't, you could research them. It's with Google, you can easily find explanations that support this idea, and of course be critical and just allow the possibility. It's not saying you have to believe it, of course not. It should be based on reasoning, it should make sense to you, but at least to allow the possibility, and then allow the possibility, and that makes it even harder, that we may be reborn in what is called a lower realm, a different realm of existence, which maybe is even harder, is even more difficult than past and future lives. Yeah, I guess it is, because we can't see past and future lives, but there are some indications that life goes on, that it's not just the brain. Forgot to mention earlier, out of body experiences or near-death experiences where the brain activity has stopped, but the mind is still working, etc. But there's some indication of the existence of past and future life. But when it comes to life in other realms, except for the animal realm, of course, we're aware of that. But then life in other realms, such as the hellish realm and the preta realm, that is really difficult. And what is on top of that difficult is the idea that I could be reborn there. I mean, I've got a big body right now, and I can be reborn as a mosquito? Like what? Right? I mean, we believe, of course, in the existence of insects, but the thought that I could be reborn as a mosquito, that seems really hard. Maybe it's easier to imagine I'll be reborn as a tiger or an elephant or something. Yeah, somehow the mosquito seems harder. But to just consider that the mind is the main aspect, the body, well, the body doesn't exist independent of the mind. The kind of body we have is a reflection of our mind in a previous life and so forth. Not to think that there's this objectively existent body. And in that way, it makes it possibly easier. But then, of course, also consider the existence of life that we cannot perceive. Now, I guess in the 21st century, our main argument would not be, well, the church, the rabbi, they don't talk about it, and so it cannot be true. It's more scientists haven't established this. But that's not a very good reason, because there's still a lot that science has to establish. I mean, I don't know, 400 or 500 years ago, when scientists didn't know about bacteria and viruses, if someone talked about them, they'll be like, well, science hasn't, well, some people would argue, well, scientists haven't found those, so they probably don't exist. But then, of course, we know it was established then later on, and so now we know they exist. Well, I'm pretty sure about life in the other realms, it can be scientifically proven, but it hasn't been done yet. So, well, scientifically doesn't mean as us by us necessarily as limited human beings, but who knows? There's still a lot that science hasn't understood yet. So maybe one day they actually discover the existence of these life forms. And in that way, just because we haven't gotten there yet doesn't mean it's impossible. So again, to keep an open mind. I don't want to move towards refuge yet. I don't want to do it. I was tempted to just drop it, but this is so difficult that I want you to do it. Okay. Anyway, that's for this coming week. So if you're interested in doing this practice, then please try as much as you can. And then let's return to the material. So we're done with the introduction. Well, we still got some questions. We still got some questions left. Let me address those questions. I didn't fully answer Jimmy's question last time. So his argument is, first of all, labeling and the mind. So the mind labeling and the sense consciousnesses that provide us with the appearance of the basis of imputation or basis of designation, they should arise at the same time. But as I said last time, that's not possible, because first you need to have the, what's it called, the appearance of the basis of designation first before you can label. So there's definitely a relationship between cause and effect, which is why here, when he argues, is it the same as the whole and its parts? Okay, it's the same as the whole and its parts, subject and object, they have to actually exist at the same time. I totally agree. Of course, you cannot have a whole entity without its parts, and you can't have the parts of something without that something, that whole existing. So they exist at the same time. They're one nature and therefore exist simultaneously. Subject and object too. You can't have a subject, a mind without an object, and an object. You can't have an object without a mind perceiving it. However, when we take a sense consciousness and its object, for instance, so let's say a table, the table exists a moment earlier. A moment earlier, the table exists, and what appears to the mind in that moment, that table is no longer out there. It changes all the time. So it's no longer exactly the same table. The table that appears to the mind, it's not exactly the same as the table that was there before, because it takes a moment for, well, if we just take it from a scientific point of view, the retina and the light to hit the retina and so forth, all that has to take place first before an eye consciousness perceiving the object can arise. Therefore, there's a time difference, which means, thus, the object that is perceived by the eye consciousness is its cause. So to believe that they exist at the same time, and of course, subject object, in the sense that the moment you have a mind, you have an object, and the previous moment of table that now appears to the mind, a moment earlier wasn't the object of the mind yet. But when it appears to the mind, that moment later, after all that stuff with the retina and so forth has taken place, well, then it's become the object, then the mind and the object exist at the same time. But that which appears, that object, was there a moment earlier. I mean, not as an object, but it was there a moment earlier. So anyway, having said that, therefore, cause and effect when it comes to consciousness are very important. It's not like the Chittamatra school. So I know Jimmy feels very strongly about the Chittamatra school, has a strong connection to that, but that would be a problem to assert that they exist at the same time, because then cause and effect would no longer work when it comes to labeling and so forth. Anyway, I hope I've answered this question fully, and if I haven't, Jimmy, you're welcome to ask again. Okay, next question from B. The chart on page 19 seems to be saying that whatever part of conventional existence that is conventional truth is conventional existence, and this is leaving out the fact that conventional truth is conventional existence of pure or impure phenomena perceived as inherently existent due to the veil of ignorance. But first of all, as I said before, it's leaving out a lot, because it's only a short summary of conventional truth, ultimate truth, and conventional existence. And due to ignorance, well, yes, conventional truth, they are not actual truth. They do exist, but they're not actual truth. They're only truth to ignorance, to the ignorance. But that doesn't mean they don't exist. Okay. But we can't go into this right now. If you want to learn about this, any of you, I mean, Lee's mentioning it here, so I assume she studied this. But for those who haven't, well, there's plenty of material to learn more about the conventional truth. Anyway, conventional truth are conventionally existent. We've heard that. And so the etymology or the meaning of the word conventional truth, well, that is explained here by way of the veil of ignorance and so forth. And as I said, if you're interested in that, you can learn more about it in books on the truth, for instance. But she goes on to say, so one like Gorampa. So Gorampa was a 15th century Sakya master. And him and Lama Tsongkhapa had some debates or had some disagreement. Well, they didn't debate as such, because Gorampa was born much later, but a century later, I think. Anyway, so they didn't meet as such, but Gorampa criticized Lama Tsongkhapa's writing and Dorpoba's, another great master's writing. And that was great. I mean, it gave food for debate. I mean, this is the beauty of the Buddhist tradition, that debate and reflection and skepticism, all that is encouraged. And so they criticized each other with great respect, but still they would disagree with each other. And therefore, different ideas, different concepts are explained differently, which just allows for a richer understanding. Because, well, someone questions the view of this person, then you need to dive deeper into what they're saying, get a better understanding, see whether it's justified, the criticism is justified or not, and so forth. But Gorampa explains things slightly differently to Lama Tsongkhapa. So it may be confusing in the beginning, because he talks about conventional truth, as she says here. So like Goramba might think that by eliminating ignorance, conventional truth is eliminated, because it's like a false illusion, according to Goramba. And so therefore you're only left with an ultimate truth. So there's no conventional existence. Well, Lama Tsongkhapa explains it slightly differently. And so in that sense, conventional existence, conventional truth, I suppose, like, I don't know much about Goramba. I've only read very superficially some of his explanations, so I don't know that much about it, but it seems like he uses the terminology slightly different, has a different take on, for instance, takes more literally how the Indian masters talked about phenomena don't exist, they're not existent, and so forth. Whereas Lama Tsongkhapa explains it slightly differently. So it can get confusing, as I said, especially in the beginning. But take Lama Tsongkhapa's view, which I'm more familiar with, well, there are conventional truth, even after you've eliminated ignorance and even you've become a Buddha, because a Buddha himself or herself is a conventional truth. It's not an ultimate truth, the way Lama Tsongkhapa defines it. It's not emptiness. Emptiness, and the ultimate truth is always emptiness. So therefore, it's not possible to mix Goramba and Lama Tsongkhapa, because at least in terms of their explanation, they're contradictory. In terms of what's underneath, what's really the meaning, and just in terms of the terminology possibly being used in a slightly different way, and they're actually agreeing with each other, that's a different matter. But like I said, I don't know enough about it. So what is the relationship between conventional truth and contaminated phenomena? Well, whatever is a contaminated phenomenon is necessarily a conventional truth. Whatever is a conventional truth is not necessarily a contaminated phenomenon. For instance, the Buddha's mind, the Buddha's body, is not a contaminated phenomenon, but a conventional truth. It's not emptiness. And then she asks on page 16, but of course the I appears to and is perceived by correct consciousnesses that don't apprehend inherent existence or anything else that does exist, such as the conceptual consciousness perceiving the I as having Buddha nature. What do you mean here by correct? Okay, great. So correct is a conventional valid cognizer that establishes conventional truth or correct consciousness. How can any conceptual mind of all sentient beings, not a meditative outpost, not have appearance and hence apprehension of inherent existence? Well, this hence shouldn't be there. Not have appearance and therefore apprehension. No, just because something appears to exist inherently doesn't mean you apprehend it. To give you an example, as you're looking at, let's say, the screen of your computer or whatever you're using, an iPhone or whatever screen you have. So when you look at that, actually, what is in the sphere of your vision? I'm not talking about the atoms, for instance, in the back of your screen. No, the atoms in the sphere of your vision, whatever is like right in front of you, those atoms, right, they appear to you. If they didn't appear to you, then how could anything appear, right? Your screen is made of atoms, pixels as well. I mean, on a larger, not that, you know, on a larger scale, it's made of pixels. They all appear to you. Are you apprehending them with your eye consciousness? No, unless you got a computer from the 90s, maybe you see all the pixels. But no, if you've got a modern computer and so forth, you don't see the individual pixels, but they appear to your mind. You don't perceive the atoms of which your computer is made, the molecules. You don't perceive them, you don't apprehend them, but they appear to you. So this is an example of something appearing without being perceived by the mind. In the same way, inherent existence appears to the mind. And that's why we say the mind, any mind, ordinary mind, in my case, all my minds, to all my minds, inherent existence appears. But the minds are not aware of that. It's just how things appear. So from that perspective of how things appear, I say my mind is mistaken. But inherent existence is not the main object. It's not what my mind perceives. For instance, my eye consciousness, it doesn't perceive inherent existence. So it's correct from the point of view of its main object existing, but it's mistaken with regard to that object appearing to exist inherently. Now, this takes me back to the charts that I prepared last time. Now, this time I put the date for today's date, because we're going through it today. I've changed it a little bit. Oh no, I forgot. You got the right one. I got the wrong one. I actually changed it a little bit, but Dalit already sent it to you. Here it says directly realizing. I added directly realizing to this part of the chart, just to point out that this is the only mind that is neither mistaken nor wrong. I mean, it is correct anyway, because its main object exists, but it's also not mistaken. And that's the one B mentions. There's a direct perceiving mind, directly realizing emptiness. That's the only mind that is not mistaken in the continuum of a sentient being. If you've attained that mind, I mean, I don't have it. So all my minds are mistaken because they all have a mistaken appearance. And then I went through them, conceptually realizing here in French cognizer, conceptually realizes its object. And correct assumption doesn't even realize, it perceives, but doesn't realize its object. And then the nose consciousness, yeah, so they all realize their objects, yes, but they're still mistaken because their objects appear to exist inherently. But their main objects, that which they apprehend, exists, and therefore we can say it's a correct consciousness. So really, how do you check what kind of mind something is? Well, you check on the basis of what appears. That shows you, is it mistaken or not? If something appears that is impossible, such as inherent existence, you can categorically say it's a mistaken mind. But correct or not does not relate to how the object appears, but it's checking, does your main object exist or not, right? Is your main object. What is your main object? Here in the case of the incense, okay, I can't see everything. I need to first remove, okay, I'll do this right now. Sorry, I just need to, yeah. Okay, now you got gone. So now I can see correct because its main object does exists, and therefore it's apprehended correctly. It's apprehended correctly means it can only be apprehended correctly if it exists. If there's something that doesn't exist, well, then that becomes its main object, and obviously it's not apprehended correctly. If I perceive, for instance, if I have here in the case of the wrong consciousnesses, here you have the last list of conventional consciousnesses, wrong eye consciousness. In the new chart that I sent you, it says erroneously perceiving the horns of a rabbit. Horns of a rabbit don't exist. So if you perceive horns of a rabbit, it means you don't apprehend your main object correctly because they don't exist. And therefore it's a wrong consciousness, but not mistaken. Sorry, and as well, and mistaken as well, as both. Whatever is a wrong consciousness must be mistaken. Because of course, not only does its inherent existence appear to it, but also something, well, rabbit having horns, that also appears because the main object appears. And since that appears plus inherent existence, it's mistaken in a twofold way, on the basis of inherent existence and on the basis of its main object, or due to the appearance of its main object. Anyway, yeah, so in order therefore to answer B's question, I hope I've been able to do that, and if not, you can always ask again. Yeah, so you've got this slightly different version of the charts, except I don't have it here in front of me, but I sent it to you. One thing I want to mention, and I want to mention this time and again. I mean, time and again means not every time, but I want to repeatedly and frequently remind you that, of course, when we study this, it's extremely helpful if you take whatever you learn. So let's take this example and allow for it to really touch you. It shouldn't just be an intellectual understanding, but there should also be a moment, just as I'm talking, to become aware, this is true for me as well. I have these different minds. I mean, well, we may not have yogic direct perceivers. We may not have an inferential belly cognizer realizing the emptiness of the body, but we have other inferential minds that conclude on the basis of correct reasons that there is fire in my neighbor's house because there's smoke coming out of the window, right? We can infer on the basis of the smoke that there's fire. So we have inferential cognizers. We correctly assume a lot. We have sense consciousnesses that are correct. Here, inferential cognizers, as I mentioned. So we have a lot of correct minds, but they're all mistaken. They're all mistaken. So the appearance of inherent existence is ever present. And in a way, it should hit us to such a degree that it's like, what can I do against this? I mean, I may be correct about perceiving incense and perceiving that something is impermanent, that I may die anytime, but I'm still very much influenced by my misperception, which is not always active. The misperceiving mind, that basic or root misperception or misconception, that is a conceptual mind that actively apprehends inherent existence. So to that mind, inherent existence doesn't just appear, it also apprehends inherent existence. That's a different matter. That's a conventional that's a wrong consciousness, but that's not always present. That's not always present. It arises frequently, but it's not always there. But nonetheless, every mind is influenced, is affected by that root misperception by way of the appearance of inherent existence being ever present. That's why it's so difficult to realize emptiness, because we have no idea how it appears, what it looks like, if you like. I mean, always the opposite appears. So it's really helpful to allow a feeling to rise to such a sense. I'm giving you just an example, but a sense of, oh, this is true for me. I have all these different minds, all these different consciousnesses. I mean, even when I'm asleep, my mind is there. While I'm in deep sleep, there's consciousness. There's always consciousness. And every single one of them is mistaken. Every single one of them. Unless I realize emptiness directly. Even if I realized emptiness conceptually, that is with an inferential cognizer, I still would have the appearance of inherent existence. So let's not underestimate this mind that is ever present, well, ever present in the sense, no, this appearance that is ever present. And of course, therefore, let's not underestimate how difficult it is to realize emptiness and not just spend a few minutes every week, a few hours every week, a few minutes or hours every day with it, but focus more on it. Because if that's the solution to all that problem, and we're trying everything to overcome our problems, well, we should do so with the right tools, with that which really moves towards the removal of suffering. So I just wanted to remind you of that again, to allow yourself to be moved again in this emotional way. Okay, what am I doing here? Okay, great. Anyway, we're done with this. As you see here.
Please, may I ask a clarification?
Oh, yes, yes, please go ahead.
For a bodhisattva in the pure ground, it is said that they still have appearance of true existence,
yes,
but they don't believe it.
That's
they know
right.
that it's false.
Yeah, depending on which bodhisattva, yeah, but pure ground, like
in
an
the pure
Arya
ground,
bodhisattva. Yeah.
in the pure ground.
Okay, yes.
So what do they, so they have appearance of true existence, but what do they apprehend?
Well, they apprehend different things. I mean, they don't believe in it in the sense they still, as an Arya, they may even still have the misconception. They may still have the root ignorance, right? They have not necessarily overcome it, but they don't believe it means it's like right now, we believe phenomena exist the way they appear to us, right? We believe there are different levels of belief. I mean, first of all, now as Buddhists, we may question if things appear in that way. And then on a deeper level, we're still confused by, I mean, we're still controlled by our self-grasping mind. A bodhisattva, on the other hand, a bodhisattva in the pure realm, so an Arya bodhisattva perceives, for instance, there's certain minds that realize the illusion-like nature of phenomena. Okay, so they realize that phenomena are like an illusion, which means they know that phenomena appear to exist inherently, but with that same mind also know that this appearance is false. This is when we say they don't believe in inherent existence, but it doesn't mean that they don't still have a mind, another mind, a conceptual consciousness, an innate conceptual consciousness that arises spontaneously and still perceives inherent existence. Because that mind you have as long as you're not liberated. And liberation takes place on the 8th ground of a bodhisattva. So you have 7 grounds, 7 levels, 7 bhumis as an Arya bodhisattva when you're not liberated yet. But they know exactly when these minds arise as a what would you call it? Due to the habituation, this innate tendency that they're born with, and they don't arise often. They don't arrive as frequently as they do for us. They're they can easily avert them. They can easily apply the antidote for those not to manifest for a long time. I mean, in our case, they can go on for hours. I perceive this neighbor of myself that I'm so angry with. I perceive this to exist inherently as an evil person. I can do that for hours, right? A bodhisattva, it arises and it goes. It arises and it goes, because they know that is a wrong consciousness. It just arises as a tendency of the past, but it can be overcome and they're not fooled by it. Does that make sense, P?
Yes, but okay, let's give a specific example. A bodhisattva in the pure ground, in the post-meditative phase,
Yes.
looking at a flower.
Okay.
Is that, the flower would appear inherently,
Yes.
but the bodhisattva, what would the bodhisattva apprehend? Would they apprehend an inherently existent flower, or a merely imputed flower, or a flower that is kind of like non-differentiated of either?
Okay, it depends on which mind is active in the continuum of a bodhisattva. If they don't pay attention, right? If they don't pay attention in that moment, maybe due to the habit of past life, in that moment, the mind could arise that apprehending this misconception, taking the flower as main object, and apprehending that flower to be existing inherently, to exist inherently. That may arise, but probably not for a long moment, right? Or it could be, as you said, in that moment, they've just come out of the meditative state. So you're saying post-meditative period, the post-meditative period. So let's say this meditation period has still a very strong influence on them. So as they perceive this flower, there's a conceptual consciousness to which the flower appears to exist inherently, but they know with that mind, which is like a mind that knows that it knows the illusion-like nature of this flower. So they're aware that the flower appears to their mind to exist inherently, but doesn't exist that way. So with that one mind, they actually know that is possible. Or they don't even think of anything. They don't perceive it to exist inherently in that moment, which is probably for a bodhisattva on that level much rarer than for us, as I said early on. They just apprehend the flower, don't think of anything and just enjoy the beautiful flower, for instance. I mean, if it's a sense consciousness, anyway, it cannot be a mind that apprehends inherent existence. It cannot be. It only appears. But even with a conceptual mind that arises together with this, or just right after the sense consciousness perceiving the flower, they may just be thinking, oh, what a beautiful flower, and that's it. Okay, so there are all three possibilities. For us, having not realized emptiness, I mean, if we haven't realized emptiness, the possibility of perceiving it as having an illusion or realizing that it's like an illusion is not yet possible. Okay, but when we say Arya Bodhisattvas can do that, that doesn't mean that every mind does that. They still have afflictions. Yes.
So an illusion-like flower is a merely imputed flower?
Everything is every flower is a merely imputed flower.
But do they apprehend that as such?
Yes, after you realize emptiness, then you can know that this flower is merely apprehended. You can know that it's a conventional truth. With certain minds, they can know that. If they pay attention to it, they can know that. Right?
Thank you. Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you very
You're
much.
welcome. Okay, sure. All right. Now, I meant to remove the date. Actually, Tia, my friend, she suggested to remove the date because, well, we're done with this fundamental wisdom intro. So to just have it without the date and just have it as material, because it's not specific to any class now. We finished last time. So anyway, and then, oh, okay. I don't have the material. I forgot to put the material there. Okay. Dalit, could you just do me a favor and make me not a co-host? Take me off the co-host thing and just bear with me for a sec. So I have to look for it. Okay. Am I still a co-host?
One moment.
Sorry, I made a mistake. I put everything in there except for one.
Yeah, I move you.
Okay, great. Just a sec. I just need to find the right material because today we'll start with the first.
You can see in the chat, I put a link to the...
It's in the chat? Yeah, I always forget something.
You can see it from Google Drive to open it, maybe.
Can I do that? Okay, just a sec. So it's the first chapter. Here we go. And then we have it. Okay.
You want to be a co-host again?
Just a sec. Wait a minute. I'm almost done. Sorry for that. Okay, you can make me a co-host again.
Yeah.
Okay. Can you now see or no? Probably not
You
yet.
to share again.
I need to press that again. Okay, just a sec. And here we go. All right, the first chapter. All right. So we're done. I hope I finished. I still haven't addressed what David said. Sorry, David. David, I'll definitely do it next time. There's not enough time. But let's start now the first chapter. Having completed the introduction, now we'll read the first verse, the first chapter called Examination of Conditions. And so the first verse of chapter 1 introduces the first part. Of course, the fundamental wisdom can be divided in different parts, but here it specifically describes the lack of inherent existence of dependent arising, which happens in dependence on other phenomena, as we know. So Usually when we think of emptiness, we think of tables and the eye and the body, like nouns, like things. I mean, not activities such as arising or qualities such as arising. Now that seems difficult. But if we say, in order for something to exist, it has to arise first, it makes sense to analyze, what does that arising mean? Anyway, so the beginning of the first chapter deals with, or the beginning of the fundamental wisdom describes the emptiness of dependent arising. And then that emptiness can be explained from the point of view of phenomena, the selflessness or the emptiness of phenomena, and persons. So chapter 1 explains the emptiness of phenomena through an examination of the agency and action with respect to a cause and its effect. All right. Now, this is really just taken from Lama Tsongkhapa's commentary on this. So really what it says is dependent arising is the focus, its emptiness is the focus, and then dependent arising can be explained from the point of view of phenomena and persons, and therefore the emptiness also from the point of view of phenomena and persons. Okay, so let's see. What does it say here? There are two translations. The first translation is in J. Garfield's text, but the way I understand this verse is just a little bit different. There's hardly any difference. In the last two lines, that's where the main difference comes. So there's neither from nor. In Tibetan, it really just says not from itself. And I suppose in Sanskrit as well, I don't think they have this neither nor version. So yeah, so not from itself, not from something different, not from both, and not without a cause. Does anything, anywhere, ever arise? Okay, this is what the first verse tells us. Now, what is this first verse? What is it all about? It's about this fourfold reasoning. There's a reason given here, made of 4 parts, that establishes the emptiness of arising. Phenomena don't arise inherently, don't objectively. They don't arise intrinsically. It's not from the side of the arising that there is some arising taking place. No, it's merely labeled. Now, we've heard about arising before. Of course, among the 8 attributes of dependent arising that were explained as part of the verses of homage, well, it mentions the emptiness of ceasing first, does not cease, does not arise, and so forth. As you remember, we went through this as these 8 attributes, and the first one being not ceasing. However, because it's easier to understand the lack of inherent existence of ceasing after having understood the lack of inherent existence of arising, it's mentioned first. So the emptiness of arising is explained first in the verse of homage. Ceasing comes first, and we also know why, because the order doesn't really make any difference. It says, like, if phenomena existed inherently, the order doesn't make any difference. But really, in terms of how we understand it better, well, we understand it better. First, something arises and then it ceases. So it's easier for us to understand the emptiness of the arising first before understanding the emptiness of ceasing. This is very interesting, this idea that certain types of emptiness, of course, dependent on their basis, are easier than others. It's easier to realize, to give you another example, it is easier to realize the emptiness of a table than the emptiness of the mind. Why? Because we're more familiar with tables than with minds. We're not that familiar with our own mind, for instance, although it's always there. But that's one reason. Also, it's easier. Oh, someone's got their microphone on. Can you mute yourself because you're not muted? It's easier to realize the lack of inherent existence of anger versus love, because love is something we want. We aspire towards. Anger we don't want. So it's easier to realize the emptiness, therefore, of the anger than of love. Or it's easier to realize the emptiness of an ordinary person versus a Buddha. Okay, so there are differences from the point of view of the object. Okay, now the reasons why one emptiness is easier understood than another is different for each object. Okay, anyway, here it explains us that. So Lama Tsongkhapa just mentions it in its commentary, and it's just this little side note, but I still thought it was interesting because it allows me to then point out, I mean, you may already know this, but just to point it out, and this, if you didn't, that emptiness is not the same for us in terms of, well, it can be harder and it can be easier for us to understand certain types of emptiness. Okay. The meaning of the first verse is the following. So now you'll see with the bold letters, they give you the root verse again, and then with the words in between, hopefully it makes it clear what this verse means. So the meaning of the verse is that an impermanent phenomenon does not arise inherently. So that is the predicate, it's the premise, it's that which we're trying to prove. So that arising, that an impermanent phenomenon, such as a sunflower, does not arise inherently because it does not arise from itself. It does not arise from something inherently different. It does not arise from both itself and something inherently different. And it does not arise without a cause. Since there's not anything anywhere that ever arises in any of these four ways. Okay, this is what these 4 lines mean. Okay, that's a little odd. Does not arise from itself, does not arise from something else. I mean, what does that really mean? The last reason here, since there's not anything anywhere that ever arises in any of these 4 ways, indicates that no external or internal impermanent phenomenon, so anything, whether external or internal thing, in Buddhist philosophy, a thing is described as something impermanent. Usually the word is ngobo in Tibetan, but it can sometimes, although it's translated as thing, can also refer to phenomena in general, which is why the word in English in the Buddhist context is also sometimes used that way. But since we're here talking about impermanent phenomena arising or not, this is mainly referring to impermanent phenomena. Here, thing means impermanent phenomenon. Okay, so whether external or internal impermanent phenomena, they do not at any place, at any time, or owing to any philosophical system ever arise from itself, from something inherently different, and so forth. Again, this is Lama Tsongkhapa's explanation. Based on Lama Tsongkhapa's commentary. Of course, others have also explained it in that way, but I mainly focused on what Lama Tsongkhapa said, and hopefully in that way, his words are well, if they've not already have been clear after you read it, will become clear through this. So they never arise, nothing, at any time, at any place, and owing to any philosophical system. So this is something Lama Tsongkhapa also mentioned. So what does that mean, philosophical system? Well, although Buddhist philosophical systems such as the Chittamatra school, for instance, they assert, the highest school, which we're studying here, doesn't assert inherent existence, but the Chittamatra school, they do. But just because they assert inherent existence, that doesn't make it true. So it's not owing to or through the power of these philosophical systems that phenomena exist that way. So in other words, just because someone believes it to be true doesn't make it true, right? Now, if you hear that, you may think, of course not, of course not. But I thought it's important to mention this because we have a tendency sometimes that we think, well, everyone else thinks so, I should think the same, right? Oh, everyone else believes it. That's probably true because everyone else believes it. I mean, living with other people, living in a society, we sometimes have that thought, oh, everyone else thinks, practicing Buddhism doesn't make sense, so it probably doesn't make sense. No, Just because everyone else believes something, we should still question what people believe. Also, philosophical systems, are they right or not? I mean, are they correct? Are they in accordance with reality or not? And although there are more Buddhist philosophical systems that believe in inherent existence, that assert inherent existence, there's only one philosophical system, Buddhist philosophical system, that is therefore called the highest system, that doesn't believe in inherent existence. That doesn't make it true. Just because there are more philosophical sub-schools of Buddhism that believe in inherent existence doesn't make it true. So that's stressed here again. Okay, anyway, the four-part reason that was just mentioned, does not arise from itself, from something else and so forth, is called the diamond sliver reasoning. You may have heard of it, Dorje Denzin. I couldn't find the Sanskrit, so you only got the Tibetan. Actually, Jimmy, you could add that if you want to. Anyway, because each reason is a powerful means of eliminating the root misconception. That's why it's called the diamond slivers, right? It's in itself, it's just a part of a reason, but it's like a diamond. It's very powerful. Like a diamond can cut very hard material, can cut glass and so forth. Well, similarly here, it can cut through the misconception. Each of these reasons are powerful means, and put together, they can combine, these four reasons eliminate, or can prove that phenomena do not arise inherently. Okay, so where do we come? Why do we have these four? So this is explained here. If an impermanent phenomenon arising were to exist inherently, if something were to exist inherently, it would either arise from a cause or without a cause. Right? I mean, it's like those two, either arises from a cause or without a cause. If it were to arise from a cause, there are three possibilities. It would arise from a cause that was of the same nature as itself. So if something exists inherently, so either would be of the same nature as itself, so it would really be the same, or inherently different from it, or both. Okay, or both. And if it was neither, it would arise without a cause. So that would be the second possibility. It would arise without a cause, which is why you have only four possibilities. If something were to arise inherently, there are these four possibilities. It would arise from itself, from something inherently different, from both, or without a cause. And in order to understand that something cannot arise inherently, those four possibilities, of course, need to be negated. In fact, negating them first allows us to then understand, well, then it can only arise in dependence on other things, conventionally, not inherently. And so these four extreme ways of arising are asserted, first of all, by different Indian philosophical systems. Now, you may think at this moment, what do I care about? I mean, non-Buddhist, some of them are non-Buddhist philosophical systems. Do I have to learn about them now? I mean, honestly, I remember at the beginning when I studied Dharma, I was like, I want to learn about Buddhism. I don't care what the Samkhyas say. That was just my thought. But it's so helpful. It is so helpful because, first of all, the Samkhyas, as an example, and they're mentioned first, are very sophisticated, They still exist. And many of their views may reflect our own attitude. Not in exactly the same way, but it's really interesting. When we studied some of the non-Buddhist schools, some of their assertions that were formulated, I was thinking, I kind of believe that. Oh my God, I kind of have that view, not in a sophisticated way as they do, but the spelling out, the way they describe their views helps us to identify our own views and then become more aware of our own wrong views and then more effectively overcome them, because we have to become aware of a wrong view before we can actually reduce it. Okay. Now, before I explain the Samkhya view, because we don't have much time left, I want to go to show you the first illustration that I prepared. This is how I depicted the Samkhya view. Now, how does that relate to our own personal view, because our view is similar but not the same. So before I explain the Samkhya view, which is very sophisticated, let's check whether there is a notion, whether there's a way in which we may have a sense the flower is already in that little seed. Now, this is, of course, if I were to ask, do you think the sunflower already exists in there? We would say no. You know, if it were in there, you could open it up and you would find the sunflower, but that'd be bizarre. Like a, you know, it's almost like a child would believe there are little people in the television. It's like, we're not that stupid. If we open up, you know, TV, you know, there are no little people in there. And you know, there's no sunflower in the seed, because when we open it up, there isn't one. But when I say we have a sense, we usually talk of, for instance, if I show you two seeds, a sunflower seed and a barley seed. Actually, the scriptures talk about a barley seed. And I first had a barley seed. But the problem was so difficult to draw a barley seed within a barley seed. You can hardly see it, right? A barley sprout in a barley seed. You can hardly see it. So I chose the sunflower. It was just a little clearer, better to see. So anyway, so the point is, if I showed you two seeds, a barley seed and a sunflower seed, and I were to tell you why, I were to ask you, why does from the sunflower seed the sunflower arises, but not from the barley seed? What would be your answer? Well, one has the potential to give rise to the sunflower seed and one doesn't, right? Potential, such a favorite term. Oh, one has the potential and one doesn't. But then if I ask you further, where's that potential? Where's the potential? What is that potential? It almost feels like there's this thing, sunflower potential, something I can find that almost seems as concrete as this little sunflower in there. Of course, we don't really believe there's a sunflower in there, but we believe there's a sunflower potential, right? Something in there that makes that the potential. And again, the first chapter actually deals with that potential. What is that potential? Other than just being labeled on nothing to be found from the side of the object, right? So we have the potential to become a Buddha. We have a tendency to feel like there's a little Buddha within me. No, it's not. That would be like a little sunflower in the sunflower seed, right? Sense I have a little Buddha inside me. Sometimes it's explained in that way, just to emphasize the fact that we can all become fully enlightened. So let's go for it, basically. But it may also, depending on our sense of reality, reinforce the sense there's something really inherent there. And of course, eventually we'll overcome that. Eventually we'll go beyond that, and then actualize our fullest potential and become enlightened. But what I'm trying to say is, to a certain degree, just saying there's a potential of a sunflower, I guess it kind of, there's a sense, there may be a sense that there is really something there. Okay, but not just except it's not in the form of literally a sunflower. I just wanted to mention that. Just wanted to basically put it out there before actually dealing with arising from itself in the way it is accepted by the Samkhya. So let's look at this really sophisticated school, even though the Buddha refutes them, but it's not easy. If you study them in detail, it becomes clearer and clearer. It's not easily refuted, and it's definitely a very sophisticated system. Okay, so arising from itself is philosophically asserted by the school of the non-theistic Samkhyas. Non-theistic. Some would say you don't need to make that distinction between theistics and non-theistics, but some say there is this distinction, and so I made this distinction. Non-theistic Samkhyas are those who do not believe in a creator God. Obviously, from that we know there are Samkhyas who do believe in a creator God. they've existed for thousands of years, so makes sense there are different movements. So here are the ones, the non-theistic ones, don't believe in a creator God. But what the Samkhyas in general accept, they maintain that a result, such as the sunflower, for example, arises from causes and conditions that are pervaded by a single primal substance, Prakti, or Jitso as it's called. Okay, so this primal substance, it pervades the causes and conditions, it pervades the result. It's a little hard to understand, but anyway, so based on that, therefore, the nature of its substantial cause, a sunflower seed would be of the same nature as its conditions, water, warmth, and so forth. Likewise, the nature of the sunflower and the nature of its causes and conditions would also be the same. It will all be the same nature. Okay? As they accept that the sunflower seed and the sunflower are not the same, they don't say they're the same. They're the same nature, but not the same. They're not saying that the sunflower literally arises from the sunflower itself. So arising from itself doesn't literally mean a sunflower arises from the sunflower. Nevertheless, when they assert that the sunflower arises from its seed and from its own nature, because they say that the two natures of the sunflower and of the sunflower seed, they are the same, they say the sunflower must arise from its own nature, and therefore the sunflower, if it arises from something that is its own nature, it has to exist at the same time as the sunflower. If something is the same nature, right? I'm the same nature as my mind. My mind and myself are the same nature, which is why I can't exist without my mind, and my mind can't exist without me. Therefore, if the sunflower arises from a cause that is its own nature, the sunflower must exist at the time of its cause, right? It arises from something that is of the same nature. So at the time of the cause, the sunflower, the cause and the sunflower are of the same nature. So the sunflower must exist at the time of its cause. But since we can't see it, it exists in a non-manifest way. So in that way, and this explanation is from Lama Tsongkhapa's Illumination of the Intent, his commentary on Chandrakirti's entry into the middle way, which of course, Chandrakirti's entry into the middle way is one of the main commentaries on the text we're studying right now. Okay, so entry into the middle way, Lama Tsongkhapa explains this idea. He explains that in the way I just went through it. I just explained it in here as well. So saying they basically, because of their root assertion, they're actually saying that the sunflower must exist at the time of the sunflower because it arises from the same nature. And this is how this picture, I ended up doing this picture. In the end, they say this sunflower and its cause are one nature. So it means the sunflower has to exist already because everything that is of one nature with something exists at the same time. And if those two, the sunflower seed and the sunflower, are of one nature, the sunflower has to exist already at the time of the seed. But since we can't see it, it's non-manifest. So in the end, this is how the Samkhya school, this is, I guess you could say it's also the Buddhist interpretation of the Samkhya school. But if you then say, well, if the Samkhya school doesn't really assert that, why say that? It's not about refuting the Samkhya school for the sake of the Samkhyas. The Buddhists don't try to, with this explanation, they don't try to refute a Samkhya person. Not at all, right? The Samkhyas have their view, the Buddhists have their view, fine. No, it's in order for those following Buddhist philosophy, it is extremely helpful because to a certain degree, like I said earlier on, we may have a sense, oh, there's already some sunflowerness, some way in which the sunflower is already there. So refuting that is very helpful. It's very helpful for us. So the possibility that something arises from its own nature, from something being already, in some way the sunflower being already contained in that sunflower seed. So it's really for us to understand that that is impossible. Okay. I hope I made that clear enough. Okay, time is up and I'm already a little late. But allow me to summarize. Okay, now what we've gone through today is the first verse in particular, this verse that deals with emptiness of dependent arising. Here in particular, emptiness of the 8 attributes, and here the first attribute, which is in this case arising, the order being reversed. So arising doesn't exist inherently. And since it's all based on impermanent phenomena, well, take any impermanent phenomenon, such as the sunflower, it does not arise inherently because it doesn't arise from itself, not from something inherently different, not from both, and not without a cause. So based on that, when we understand these 4, we can come to understand that arising doesn't exist inherently, or that an impermanent phenomenon does not arise inherently. And when we understand that inherently existent arising is impossible. Therefore, our goal is to establish that arising lacks objective, inherent, intrinsic existence. But for that, we need the tool of this reasoning, this 4-fold reasoning, and we'll take our time to go through each of them. Okay, so we've gone through the first one, understanding that if something existed or were to arise inherently, well, it would arise from itself or from something inherently different and so forth. So arising from itself, hypothetically, what would that mean? Okay, so, and here we use the Samkhya explanation that is very sophisticated based on that, and hopefully we get in touch with our own sense that there's something there. All right, so this is how far we came, and of course, the first, like the introduction being really long, also a lot of time is spent with the first verse, but then later on, not that much explanation is needed, but we'll spend some time on that first verse. All right. Anyway, let's do some meditation. Okay. And as usual, we start with some breathing meditation. So, be sure that you're comfortable. Let go of any tension, any disruptive thoughts, and just be in the present. Just watch your breath. So, if phenomena were to exist the way they appear to us, appear to all of our minds, then they would exist inherently, and they would arise inherently. arising would be objectively existent. It would not be merely labeled, but exists from its own side. What does arising actually mean? An impermanent phenomenon arises from its cause. It comes into existence, independence on its cause. If the rising of a sunflower, for instance, were to exist inherently, it would either arise inherently from a cause, or it would arise inherently without a cause. If hypothetically the sunflower were to arise inherently from a cause, the sunflower would be the same nature as that cause. It would be inherently different, or both, same nature and inherently different. Or neither, which means it would arise without a cause. These are the four extreme ways something could arise if hypothetically it's arising or to exist objectively. Now let's look at the first possibility. Of the sunflower arising from something, inherently arising from something, that is of the same nature. We have the same nature means to be inseparably linked to it in such a way that they have to exist at the same time. In the same way as my body and my body's impermanence are of one nature and cannot exist separately. So if the sunflower were of one nature with its cause, the sunflower would exist at the time of its cause. Maybe there's a sense in which at times we might actually agree with that. When we think that the sunflower has the potential, the sunflower seed has the potential to give rise to a sunflower. An apple seed has the potential to give rise to an apple tree. What is that potential? Is there a concrete inherent sunflower potential in the sunflower seed? Or apple tree, potential apple tree in the apple seed? A concrete potential beyond a merely labeled one? A concrete Buddha in the center of our heart as our potential to become enlightened? As we know, such is impossible because it simply can't be found. So now let's conclude this analytical meditation by focusing on whatever insight we gained and allow this insight to move us on an emotional level, just focusing on it. And let's, of course, dedicate whatever virtue we've accumulated today. Let's dedicate it for the sake of all sentient beings towards our own future enlightenment. May we become Buddha and lead all sentient beings to that state. Let's also dedicate it towards the long and healthy life of our precious lamas, like His Holiness the Dalai Lama and all the other great masters who are still around us, still among us. And let's, of course, dedicate our virtue towards all other beings, all other sentient living beings. May help those who are sick, like Geshe, Tali Lubin, and so forth. All of those who are physically sick or mentally sick, to quickly recover and gain back their strength, be free from pain. And let's dedicate in particular for those who don't have a home, who live on the street because of addiction or because of war and conflict, houses being destroyed, or being chased away. So may they soon find a new home and be free from their sufferings of cold and desperation. So with this in mind, let's recite the prayers, the dedication prayers. Through the merits of these virtuous actions, may I quickly attain the state of a Guru Buddha and lead all living beings without exception into that enlightened state. In the land encircled by snow mountains, you are the source of all happiness and good. All powerful Chenrezig Tenzin Gyatso, please remain until samsara ends. May the precious Bodhi mind, not yet born, arise and grow. May that born have no decline, but increase forevermore. All right. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Have a great week, and I'll see you again next Monday.
Thank you.
Thank you so
Thank
much,
you.
Geshe-ma. Thank you.
Shema. Good
Thank
night.